morning it happened, I wasn't looking for anything. That's the part I keep coming back to. I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't watching her. I wasn't that guy. I had never once gone through Rachel's phone in 4 years of marriage. Not once. Not even during the early months when people still do that kind of thing out of insecurity, and then feel embarrassed about it later. I trusted her completely, without reservation, without a single footnote. My name is Nathan Cole, and I want to tell you something before this story goes anywhere. I didn't go looking for the truth. The truth found me on a Tuesday morning in my own kitchen while I was still half asleep, and my coffee hadn't even finished brewing. It was the 14th of February. I know. I'm aware of how that sounds. Valentine's Day. The universe has a sense of humor, and it is not always kind. Rachel had left her old iPhone on the kitchen counter the night before. She'd mentioned something about doing a backup transfer, moving old photos over to the new device. Something like that. I hadn't paid much attention. I was exhausted. I just landed back in Austin from 10 days in New York, where my company was in the middle of opening a second office, and my brain was operating somewhere around 40% capacity. I came downstairs that morning at just after 7. The house was still quiet. I filled my mug. I sat down at the kitchen table by the window where the morning light comes in at that particular angle that makes everything look a little more peaceful than it actually is. The old phone was just sitting there on the counter, screen facing up. I picked it up the same way you pick up a magazine in a waiting room. Not because you're interested, just because it's there and your hands need something to do while your mind catches up to being awake. The screen lit up. No passcode. The iCloud restore had finished overnight, and the messages were right there, already loaded, waiting. I read the first one, then the second. Then I stopped tracking which number I was on, and just kept reading. And in the space of about 5 minutes, everything I believed about my life quietly rearranged itself into something I didn't recognize. If you're new here, welcome. I want you to get comfortable because this one is going to take you somewhere real. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and just stay with me on this one. 10 months. That's how long the messages went back. 10 months of a conversation between my wife and my business partner, Jason Merritt, a man I had known for 7 years, a man I had built something real with, a man who gave a toast at our rehearsal dinner and said, and I will never forget this, he said that watching Rachel and me together made him actually believe in marriage again. He said it with a straight face and people applauded, and I shook his hand and told him that meant everything. That man. I sat at that kitchen table for over an hour without moving. My coffee went cold. I didn't notice. I didn't move to get up. I didn't put the phone down. I just read every single message, every lie, every small, careful construction of a secret life that had been running parallel to mine for 10 months, while I was in New York, building the expansion, flying back and forth every couple of weeks, staying in a hotel room by myself and working until midnight because I believed I was building something for both of us, for our future. For the company Jason and I had started from nothing 6 years ago. While I was doing that, they were using my absence like a door someone had left unlocked. I want to be honest about what that feels like because I think a lot of people imagine they know. They picture rage. They picture smashed plates and screaming in the front yard at 2 in the morning. They picture the kind of explosion that makes sense from the outside. That is not what I felt. What I felt was quieter than that, and in some ways, a lot harder to carry. It was grief. That specific, suffocating, bone-level grief that comes from losing someone who is still physically present, still upstairs, still going to come downstairs in 20 minutes and pour herself a cup of coffee and ask me how I slept. Still completely present and completely gone at the same time. And that gap between those two things is the loneliest place I have ever stood in my entire life. I heard Rachel's alarm go off upstairs at 8:15, her feet on the floor, water running in the bathroom sink. The exact same sounds I'd woken up next to for 4 years, the ordinary soundtrack of an ordinary morning. Here she comes, I thought. Don't move. Don't change how you're sitting. Don't let her see a single thing on your face. She came downstairs in her robe, hair still pulled back, the way she always looked before the day started. She stopped when she saw me. Nathan, you're still here. I looked up at my wife, the woman I had chosen without hesitation, the woman I had never once looked at and thought, I wonder, The woman I had loved in that clean, unqualified way that you only really manage when you haven't been given a reason not to. Just tired, I said. Didn't sleep great on the flight. She moved to the coffee maker. You want me to make a fresh pot? Sure, I said. She asked me what I wanted for dinner that night. I told her to surprise me. She smiled at me. I smiled back, and that was the last morning that felt like our life. She just didn't know it yet. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I've sat with it many times since, and it still hits the same way every time. The last normal conversation, the last ordinary Tuesday, and neither person in it knows that's what it is. She thought she was just making coffee. I was already somewhere else entirely. The days that followed were the strangest of my life. I went to work. I answered emails. I had phone calls with the New York team about timelines and client deliverables. I came home. I asked Rachel about her day. I watched television. I slept next to her. I functioned with a precision that I did not know I was capable of, and every single moment of it cost something I can't fully measure. I gave myself a ritual. Every night after Rachel fell asleep, I'd go down to the garage. I drive a 2020 Ford F-150, dark navy, which I mention only because that truck became genuinely important to my mental health during this period, in a way I did not anticipate. I would sit in the driver's seat in the dark with the engine off. I set a timer for 15 minutes, and for those 15 minutes, I allowed myself to actually feel what I was carrying. The humiliation, the grief, the specific, surgical pain of realizing that my absence had been someone else's opportunity, that the sacrifice of all those weeks away had been used against me. 15 minutes. Timer goes off. I walk back inside, because I had work to do. On the third day after I found the messages, I called a family law attorney named Carol Baines. A colleague had mentioned her name once in passing, and described her as someone who had heard every lie a marriage had ever produced, and hadn't been surprised by any of them in about 15 years. That description sounded exactly like what I needed. I sat across from her desk at 9 in the morning on a Thursday, and laid out everything. She didn't react. She didn't offer sympathy. She didn't hand me a box of tissues. She just picked up her pen and started writing. How long ago did you find the messages? 3 days. Have you confronted her? No. She looked up over the top of her reading glasses. Have you told anyone at all? No. She asked the right questions in the right order. I answered every one of them. Then she set her pen down on the legal pad and looked at me steadily. Stop talking to people, she said, and start collecting documentation. I liked her immediately. Texas, she explained, is a community property state. Marital assets get divided. 50-50 is the baseline. But the business, she said, leaning forward slightly. If there's a business involved, I need everything. Every contract, every financial record, every agreement, every clause you've ever signed with your partner. She didn't know yet that those words were going to be the most important things said in that entire meeting, because the business was where everything was buried. Jason and I had built Meridian Brand Group together. Started it 6 years ago in a shared office space in East Austin with 2 laptops, 1 client, and the collective confidence of people who have absolutely no idea yet how hard things are going to get. We grew it into something real, something I was genuinely proud of. Strong client relationships, solid recurring revenue, a New York expansion that was running ahead of its first-year projections. I kept the financial records. I always had. Jason was the relationship guy, the one who charmed clients over dinner and knew everyone's wife's name and their kids' ages. I was the one who managed the books, tracked the expenses, reviewed the invoices. I knew every dollar that moved through that business. So when I sat down with 7 years of financial records and started going through them the way a man goes through something when he has absolutely nothing left to lose, I found things. Hotel charges on the company card, each one individually unremarkable. 160 here, 220 there, consistent, monthly, running almost exactly 10 months. Every single one filed under client relations, off-site consultation. I pulled our business calendar. Every single charge corresponded to a day Jason had blocked out as a client meeting. External, no location specified. We did not have clients who required that frequency of off-site consultations. I knew that because I managed the client accounts. I knew what every relationship looked like. Jason had been billing hotel rooms to our shared business account. While I was in New York building our future, he was charging his Tuesday afternoons to our company card. and calling it work. I printed every record. I organized it into a folder with color-coded tabs, labeled it financial audit documentation, and put it in a locked drawer in my home office. 23 separate documented instances. The partnership agreement Jason and I had signed 6 years ago had been drafted by an attorney named Bernard Okafor, who was thorough in the way that quiet, meticulous people are thorough, meaning he built protections into that document that neither of us had thought hard enough about at the time. I called Bernard, asked him to send me the full original agreement. Read through every page. Section 11, subsection B. In the event that either partner is found to have engaged in unauthorized use of shared company assets, resources, or funds for personal purposes, including conduct constituting a breach of fiduciary duty, the non-offending partner reserves the right to initiate immediate dissolution of the partnership and assume primary control over intellectual property, client contracts, and operational assets. Bernard Okafor deserves, at minimum, a very nice dinner. At maximum, a monument. I called Carol Baines and told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, slowly, "How many documented instances did you say?" 23. Another pause. "Derek," she started, then caught herself. "Nathan, you have been very busy." "Yes," I said, "I have." 3 weeks after I found the messages, Rachel sat me down on a Sunday evening. The Cowboys game was on. I had been looking forward to it all week. I turned off the television the moment I saw her face. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I know," I thought. "I have known for 21 days. But go ahead. Take your time. The game will replay." What I said was, "Okay." She was already crying before she finished the first sentence, which told me exactly how she had imagined this conversation going, and exactly what reaction she was expecting from me. She told me about Jason. She called it a mistake that got out of control. She said it was never supposed to become what it became. 10 months, I thought. 10 months is not something that gets out of control. 10 months is a choice made every single morning for 300 and some days by two people who knew exactly what they were doing. But I let her talk. Then she told me she was pregnant, 3.5 months along, Jason's. And there it was. Not guilt that brought her to this conversation. Not conscience. The calendar. The math eventually stops working. And when it stops working, the conversation becomes unavoidable. "I know this is devastating," she said. Her voice was breaking. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But the baby didn't choose any of this. And I just need you to." "How long have you known?" I said. "About the pregnancy?" She blinked. The question had caught her somewhere she hadn't prepared for. "How long have you known?" A pause just long enough to mean something. "About 5 weeks," she said, quietly. 5 weeks. She had sat across from me at dinner for 5 weeks, asked how my day went for 5 weeks, kissed me goodnight for 5 weeks while knowing. Every video call from New York, every ordinary Tuesday, every good morning. She had known. I nodded slowly. Let the silence stay between us. "Okay," I said finally. "I need some time to think about this." She cried harder. I could tell she had mistaken my calmness for the first sign of forgiveness. She was wrong. "I want you to understand something, and I say this not to sound cold, but because it's the truest thing I can tell you. What I felt in that moment was not rage. It wasn't hate. It was something slower and more permanent than either of those. It was clarity, the particular clarity that comes when the last piece of something finally falls into place, and you can see the whole picture completely for the first time. And I had already decided what I was going to do with that picture. 4 days later, they showed up. All of them. Rachel's mother, Patricia, who I had genuinely liked for 4 years and still, somewhere underneath everything, did. Rachel's older brother Marcus, who is a former high school football coach, and moves through rooms like he's always the biggest person in them, which in most cases is literally true. And Rachel's Aunt Donna, who was not specifically invited, who has never once in recorded history missed a family moment of any size, and who arrived carrying a casserole dish that no one had asked for, and placed it on my kitchen counter with the confidence of someone who owns the kitchen. They arranged themselves in my living room like a panel that had already reached its verdict. Patricia spoke first. She had her hands folded in her lap, and she looked at me the way people look at someone they genuinely feel sorry for. "Nathan," she said, "you are such a good man. We all know this situation is painful, but the baby is innocent in all of this. and we just hope that you can find it in your heart to. I completely agree, I said. She stopped. That had not been the response she'd prepared for. The child is innocent, I said again. Completely. In every way. She recalibrated. Well, she continued carefully, we just hope you can stay, that you can find a way through this together, that you choose to be the bigger person here. Patricia, I said her name gently, because I meant it gently. I hear everything you're saying. I really do. I just need a little more time to figure out what kind of man I want to be in all of this. She reached across and put her hand on mine. That's all we're asking, sweetheart. Then Marcus. Marcus had been sitting with his arms crossed since he walked in, jaw set, already running the closing argument he'd prepared in the car on the way over. He looked at me the way you look at someone you've already categorized. Look, he said, I'm just going to be straight with you, man to man. Please, I said. You stay, he said. You work through this. You're the bigger man. You come out the other side of this with your head up and everyone respects you. He paused for effect. But you leave, and you're just another guy who couldn't take the pressure, who walked out on his family the moment things got real, and that's how people remember you. That's your legacy. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like he'd just handed me the answer and I only had to be grateful enough to take it. I looked at him. I looked at Patricia. I looked at Aunt Donna, who had helped herself to a spot on my couch and was currently making her way through the crackers I kept in the cabinet above the refrigerator. She had also found the remote control and looked entirely at home. 4 years I had known that woman, and she still occasionally called me Nathan with a slight pause before it, like she was accessing a file. But sure, Donna, those are good crackers. I took a slow breath and looked back at Marcus. You know what, I said quietly. You're absolutely right. I need to think really carefully about what kind of man I want to be. He nodded. Shoulders dropped. The room exhaled collectively. Even Aunt Donna paused her chewing for a moment of respectful silence. And right there, in that living room, surrounded by people who felt like they had just successfully managed a situation, I want to tell you what none of them knew. Not Patricia with her folded hands. Not Marcus with his football coach delivery. Not Aunt Donna with her casserole and her cracker dust and her complete comfort in a kitchen that was not hers. None of them knew that I had already met with Carol Baines twice. That the divorce filing was not just prepared but ready. That sitting in the locked drawer of my home office upstairs was a color-coded folder containing 23 documented instances of company card misuse that would make any judge in Texas sit up and pay attention. None of them knew that the man sitting across from them, nodding quietly, agreeing to take more time, had already made every single decision that mattered. They thought they were talking to a man who was standing at a crossroads. They were talking to a man who had already crossed, signed the paperwork, and was simply waiting for the right morning to let them all feel it. If you've been with me this long and you're feeling this story, do me one quick favor. Hit the like button, subscribe, drop a comment below, and tell me where you're watching from. I love reading every single one of those. Now let me take you back. Let me take you back to those 3 weeks of silence between Valentine's Day and that Sunday evening when Rachel sat me down and the Cowboys game went off. Because while Rachel was going through her mornings and Marcus was rehearsing his speech, and Aunt Donna was probably already planning which shelf in my kitchen had the best snacks, I was busy, very quietly, very deliberately. Day 3 after finding the messages, I called Carol Baines. I sat in her office with the door closed and the blinds at exactly the angle that meant nobody walking past could see in, and I laid out everything I knew. She didn't flinch. She picked up her pen and wrote. She gave me 2 instructions. Stop talking. Start documenting. I followed both. For 3 weeks I moved through my own life, like a man running 2 parallel tracks. Track 1 was ordinary. Breakfast, work, dinner, sleep. Track 1 was everything Rachel could see. Track 2 was where the real work was happening. I pulled 6 years of Meridian Brand Group financials. Every expense report. Every company card statement going back to when Jason and I had first opened the account. I cross-referenced them with the business calendar, with client records, with every off-site meeting Jason had ever logged. 23 hotel charges, 10 months, all filed under client relations, all on days with calendar blocks that I, who managed the client relationships, knew had no corresponding client activity. I organized everything into a physical folder, tabs, labels, printed documentation. I had operated like this since the very first year we opened the business. Methodical, organized, every dollar accountable. It turned out that habit was about to become the most important thing about me. I also reread the partnership agreement. All of it. Every page. Bernard Okafor's Section 11, subsection B, was sitting there in plain language. Exactly the way he had drafted it 6 years ago when Jason and I had skimmed it, signed it, and filed it away without truly understanding what we'd been given. I understood it now. The dissolution notice went out on a Thursday morning in early March. Certified mail, simultaneously to the office address and to Jason's home. Carol filed the formal legal paperwork at the exact same time, so there was no window, not even a narrow one, for a phone call that might complicate things. I did not call him first. I did not text him. I did not offer him a conversation or a confrontation or any version of the scene he probably imagined this ending in. Just a legal document. Clean, airtight, landing in his mailbox on an ordinary Thursday like an earthquake nobody saw coming. He called me 4 times that day. I watched my phone light up each time and I let it ring. His 5th attempt was a text message. "Nathan, come on, man. We can work this out. Don't blow up everything we built over this." Everything we built over this. I read that message twice. Set my phone face down on the desk. Went back to what I was eating. That was the last communication I ever acknowledged from Jason Merritt. Not because I was too angry. Not because I had nothing to say. Because some people don't deserve the weight of your reaction. Under the dissolution terms I had negotiated with Carol, I walked away from Meridian Brand Group with the intellectual property, every logo system, every brand asset, every design library the company had ever built. I retained the primary client list, which represented roughly 68% of annual revenue. I kept the office lease, and I walked out with the 2 people who actually made the work happen. Priya, my lead strategist, had called me 2 days after the dissolution notice. She said simply, "Please tell me you're starting something new." I said yes before I finished the sentence. Daniel, our senior creative, called the same afternoon. Same answer, same timing. What did Jason get? The company name. The LinkedIn page with 412 followers. A brand identity that no longer had any operational meaning attached to it. I hope it was worth it, Jason. I genuinely do. Now, the family. This is the part people always imagine wrong. They picture me calling everyone into a room, or a dramatic group text, or a dinner table that ends with someone's chair getting pushed back too hard. That is not what I did. I reached out to each of them individually, one at a time. I asked to meet for coffee, said I wanted to share some things before the divorce proceedings became part of the public record, and they heard everything secondhand. They all said yes. Patricia first. We met at a coffee shop on South Congress on a Wednesday morning. I arrived first, ordered 2 coffees, had the folder on the table when she sat down. I slid it across without a word and let her read. She read for about 5 minutes without looking up. When she did, her expression had changed in a way I hadn't entirely expected. "Nathan, what is this?" I turned to a specific page and pointed to a date. "Patricia, this weekend here." "This is the weekend Rachel told you she was going to visit her college roommate in San Antonio. You actually texted me that Saturday to ask if she'd arrived safely. Do you remember?" She looked at the page. "She was at a hotel in Cedar Park," I said. "With Jason." Silence. I turned another page. "This one from last spring. Rachel borrowed $600 from you. Said her car needed work." Patricia's jaw tightened, just slightly. "The charge here is from a men's watch boutique on South Lamar. It's dated the same weekend." I closed the folder gently, slid it back across the table. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you," I said. "And I'm not trying to turn you against your own daughter. She is still your daughter. She always will be. But you sat in my living room and told me to accept this situation. I thought you deserved to know what situation you were actually asking me to accept." Patricia didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Marcus was a different kind of conversation. He spent the first 5 minutes trying to frame it as a debate, which is completely on brand for a man who spent 15 years coaching teenagers to argue for field position. "I'm not saying she was right," he said, "but relationships are complicated. Marcus," I set the folder on the table between us, "I'm not here to debate anything. I'm here to share information. You can do whatever you want with it." He opened the folder, got about 4 pages in, stopped. Something moved behind his eyes. Something that looked a lot like the specific discomfort of a man who realizes he delivered a speech to the wrong person. "You told me," I said quietly, "that if I walked away I'd just be the guy who couldn't handle pressure, who abandoned his family when things got hard." I leaned forward just slightly. "I need you to look at that folder, Marcus, and tell me who actually walked away from this family first." He didn't say anything. I picked up my coffee. "I don't need an apology," I said. "I just needed you to know the whole story before you finished forming your opinion." He left. Aunt Donna got a phone call. I was not driving across Austin to have a third in-person meeting for a woman who ate my crackers without asking, and had never once called me by my name without a half-second delay like she was loading it from somewhere. I summarized the situation. She gasped at all the right moments, said "Lord have mercy" at least 5 times in 6 minutes. It was, honestly, the most efficient conversation I had ever had with her. After that, I stepped back entirely. Let the truth do what truth does when it finally reaches people who have been working with an incomplete version of it. Within 2 weeks, Rachel had stopped calling me. She had started calling Patricia instead. Frequently. Urgently. From what I gathered through people who no longer felt any obligation to stay neutral, the family fortress she had counted on had turned into a room full of people with questions she couldn't answer, and a timeline she couldn't explain away. The narrative she had carefully maintained for 10 months was coming apart at the seams, and I was not in the same room as any of it. Not the same conversation, not the same zip code. I was in my new office space in East Austin, which I'd signed the lease on 2 weeks after the dissolution, sitting across a table from Priya and Daniel, building something with my name on the door. Derek Ford Creative, the story said. My version is Nathan Cole Creative. Simple, clean, no partners, no split equity, no company card for anyone else to use, just my name on the door, and 6 years of client relationships that had always been, if I was being honest, relationships with me personally, and not with a company name. I launched with 5 former Meridian clients who came without hesitation. 3 of them sent referrals within the first 2 months. By the end of the first quarter, I had hired 4 people and had 14 active client accounts. I want to pause here and say something directly to you, because I think this is the part that matters most. When Patricia came to my house that day and told me to accept this situation, she wasn't entirely wrong. Acceptance isn't the same as surrender. Moving forward isn't the same as doing nothing. The 2 things that look the most similar from the outside can mean completely opposite things depending on where you're standing. If you've ever been in a situation where someone told you to be the bigger person while handing you a version of events that was missing half the information, you know exactly what I mean. Being the bigger person doesn't mean absorbing someone else's choices without consequence. It doesn't mean pretending damage didn't happen. It means deciding what kind of man you want to build from here, and then actually building it. Quietly, without an audience. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of something that feels like this, something where everyone around you seems to have an opinion about what you should accept and how quickly you should get over it, I want to say this. Give yourself the 15 minutes. Every night. In the truck, in the car, on the porch, wherever. 15 minutes to feel what you actually feel, and then go back inside. Because there is work to do, and the work is the way through. Silum Mahohet Morngui Mukfi in a situation like this is reacting before they understand the full picture. Exploding before they've documented anything. Confronting before they've protected themselves. The version of events that gets remembered publicly is almost always the first one that makes a sound. If you make noise before you're ready, you shape that story for them. The divorce was finalized on a morning in late summer. I called Carol Baines to thank her. She said, "You were a good client, Nathan. Organized, patient, completely prepared. A pause. Don't ever need me again," she said. "God willing," I said. She laughed. It was the first time in all our conversations that I had heard her do that. It suited her more than I expected. Jason and Rachel were together. I know this not because I was keeping track, but because information finds you whether you seek it out or not. From what I heard, through people who felt no particular loyalty to silence anymore, they were living together. They had a son. Named him something I won't repeat here because he is, in every possible way, an innocent person in this story. And I mean that without condition. I hope that boy has a genuinely good life. I hope he has people around him who show up for him consistently. He didn't choose any of the circumstances he arrived into. What I heard about Jason and Rachel was the entirely predictable portrait of two people who had constructed a relationship entirely on the electricity of secrecy and the shared thrill of getting away with something, now sitting across from each other at breakfast with nowhere to hide and nothing to chase. When you take away the stolen hours and the danger of almost being caught, what you're left with is just two people who know exactly what the other one is capable of, and who have to look at that every single day. Patricia called me on a Friday evening in November. I was in my kitchen making pasta from scratch. I had, at some point during the preceding months, developed an interest in cooking that I choose to interpret as a sign of personal growth, rather than examine too carefully. Her name on my phone gave me a moment of pause, but I answered, "Nathan." Her voice was different from the last time. Something in it had settled into a different register. She said she owed me an apology. I told her she didn't have to. She said she'd decided she did. "I sat in your home," she said, "and I asked you to accept a situation I didn't have the full picture of. I formed a strong opinion with incomplete information, and you deserved better than that from me. I showed you," I said, "because I thought you deserved to know the truth, not to cause pain, not to turn you against anyone, just because you deserve to have the whole picture before you finished forming that opinion." "I know," she said. "I understand that now." We talked for a little while after that. Nothing heavy. She asked about the business. I asked about her sister. When we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time in the quiet. I don't hate Rachel. I want to be clear about that. What she chose to do was painful in ways that took longer than I expected to fully sit with. But carrying that weight permanently, that's hers now, not mine. I put mine down somewhere between the truck and the driveway, and the first morning I woke up in my own apartment and realized the quiet felt like mine and not like absence. I went back to my pasta. Here is what I want you to take from this story. Really take from it. Not just for today, but for the next time someone tells you that patience is weakness, or that being calm means you're not handling it, or that staying quiet while you work means you've already given up. Acceptance is not surrender. Moving forward is not doing nothing. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is refuse to perform their own destruction for an audience that hasn't read the case file. You get quiet, you get organized, you get to work, and you let the truth do its job when it's finally ready to enter the room. Rachel's family told me to be the bigger man. They were trying to help, in the way that people help when they only have access to one version of a story. Terrence, Marcus, he was working with what he had. Once he had more, everything changed. This is what I want you to ask yourself right now, wherever you're watching from. If someone handed you a folder with the complete truth about a situation you had already formed an opinion on, would your opinion hold, or would you need to revise it? Because that question, right there, is where most of the real damage in situations like this actually lives. Not in the betrayal itself. In the incomplete information that travels faster than the truth and settles in before anyone thinks to check. If you've ever been the person sitting across from a family panel who came in already decided, you already know exactly how Nathan felt in that living room. And if you've ever been part of that panel, this story is for you too. Comment 1 below if you think Nathan made the right call staying silent for those 3 weeks and building his case before making a single move. Comment 2 if you think he should have given Rachel's family more of a chance, even after everything. Comment 3 if you've ever been in a situation where someone asked you to accept something without giving you the full story first. And drop a comment right now telling me what city or state you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I read every single one of those and I love knowing where this is reaching. This story is a fictional narrative, inspired by real patterns that play out in real relationships every day. It has been completely rewritten by me in Austin, Texas, with all new characters, settings, and details to avoid any reused content. All names, locations, and events are original to this version. If this story moved something in you, if it made you think, if it gave you something to hold on to, that's what it's here for. Hit that like button if this story earned it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. I will see you in the next one.